Welcome to Vegan Business Talk with Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business. Hello and welcome to episode 84 of Vegan Business Talk. I'm Katrina Fox, journalist, author, media and PR coach, copywriter, editor and proofreader, and founder of Vegan Business Media, a content, events and training platform providing success tips for vegan business owners and entrepreneurs. In this episode, I interview Preston M Smith, a vegan artist in Los Angeles. Known by the provocative moniker PMS, in 2009 Preston was commissioned to paint 12 portraits of President Barack Obama for the inaugural Purple Ball in Washington, D.C., where his paintings were distributed to celebrities and collectors, including Ed Harris, Ashley Judd, Amy Madigan, Josh Lucas, Patricia Arquette, Il Divo, and more. Having been through art school and working part-time in restaurants and other jobs while building his body of artwork on the side, Preston eventually came to a point where he was able to work full-time as an artist, showing his work in galleries as well as selling it online to the general public and collectors across the globe. Part of this transition involved a shift in mindset from the tortured, starving artist to an entrepreneur running a creative art-based business. This change is captured in a short documentary about Preston called Negativity to Creativity, directed by Antonio Lugo Ponce. The film highlights the artist's process, as well as a new painting that he's working on as part of his Garbage Collection, a series dealing with reducing our carbon footprint and becoming more eco-friendly in art. As well as including his own recycled materials in his artwork, Preston ensures he only uses vegan-friendly brushes and paints. In this interview, Preston talks about the one action you need to take to stand a chance of becoming a successful full-time artist, whether art school is still necessary to be successful, whether art shows are still relevant, how to offset some of the costs of putting on your own art show, why the tortured, starving artist trope is so dangerous and how ditching it was key to his success, the marketing strategies he uses that result in leads and sales of his artwork, how to handle the rejection that's prevalent in the art world and turn it into something positive, and much more. Here's the interview with Preston M Smith. Hello, Preston. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi, Katrina. Thanks for having me.
Now, I'm very excited to have you on the show because you're the first visual artist that we've had on the podcast. And I think it's really important for people to get their heads around the fact that something like art, is a business and can be a business, particularly if people want to make money from doing something that they love. So the first question I always ask everyone on the podcast is their why. So what are your drivers and your reasons for doing what you do and running your art-based business?
Yeah, well, I think the short answer would be because I kind of have to. I feel like I've been doing it my whole life. I've been doing something creative and in the visual arts, and I've actually tried to do other things, and I keep coming back to it. There's nothing else sits well with me. So that's the short answer. But I've always felt like I've had something to express, and that's kind of come out in a visual fashion. And I, ultimately, I want to create great artwork that inspires people and, makes them think and hopefully brings them some joy.
Wonderful. Fantastic. I love what you said about you have to do it. And I think that's often an entrepreneurial person's journey, and that they try all these other things and maybe, you go off and do these other things, but somehow it's something just pulling you to do what you do. And eventually, you have to kind of, take notice of that. So
exactly.
No, that's great. Now, so your name as an artist, it's Preston M Smith. And I noticed that the name of your art-based business, or you're also known as PMS artwork, which is quite an interesting title, shall we say. It's obviously got certain connotations, particularly for women. Exactly. Tell us a bit about why you chose that name.
Well, yeah, it's funny because some people actually will get angry when they ask me, well, why PMS? Well, yeah, I definitely is my initials, and that's how I sign my work. PMS. It's just the short version of signing, but also I thought it was kind of a great branding technique for me, as well as just throughout my life. I remember I had this story when I was a kid. I was in sexual education class, and I remember some kid in the front of the class, it got quiet, and he said, "Preston's initials are PMS," and the whole class just broke into laughter.
Oh, no.
And I was so embarrassed. And then I told myself right then and there, I was like, I'm never going to be embarrassed by this again. So I basically kind of took the power back and just, made it my own and accepted it. And also, it's kind of a reminder to not take yourself too seriously. So
I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. And notice
sure.
when you said that, I laughed as well. And then I was feeling guilty. I thought, no, I hope I'm not triggering him.
Oh, no. I moved past that.
But no, I love that you've shared that. And it's a great example of how, taking something that was once, horrible, not great, and just completely turning it on its head and reclaiming it, if you like, and going with it. So I love that you shared that. That's fantastic. So tell us about some of the key challenges. So when you were first starting out as an artist, what were some of your key challenges, Preston?
Sure. I think a lot of artists go through this, but for me, I went to school and I studied actually theater and fine art in school. And I actually worked with my professor, who was a painter, for a year afterwards, which was a great experience. But the one thing I realized when I first got to Los Angeles and I was doing it professionally was that nobody was going to help me. So wow. I was on my own. And, I don't know if they're teaching this in art school now. I hope they are, but that was lacking in my schooling. The business side of art and getting my stuff out into the world. I kind of felt like, well, I'll just create the work and, people will see it, or somebody will come and sell it for me, or, get me into the gallery and expose me to the world. But I realized very quickly that wasn't the case. That
right.
I had to kind of had to take the reins a bit. And that was kind of a shock. At the same time, I was kind of isolated for a while, and it helped me to develop a body of work. I fought the idea of, doing a lot of the legwork and selling my own work, but at least I got a big body of work out of it. But then I had to eventually turn the corner and turn it into a business.
And how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, well, I was very stubborn at the beginning. I subscribed to the whole kind of, tortured, starving artist stigma. And that was kind of a romantic idea for me for many years. But, and I think it is for a lot of people. A lot of the artists that I followed were, these kind of tortured people. And I realized after a little while, I was like, I don't want to be the tortured, starving artist. I want to be a happy and successful artist. So in order to do this, I have to kind of get out into the world. So one of the first things I did actually was, I was home alone, and I Tony Robbins commercial came on TV, and I was kind of taken by it, and I thought it was corny, but I also he had a lot of people who were recommending him and people that I admired, and I said, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. And I actually had a friend who had one of his personal power programs, and I started listening to it, and it just kind of forced me out of my comfort zone. It kind of forced me to do some things that I hadn't done before. And that was the start of everything. I started to get out into the world and push myself to grow as an artist and as a business person.
I love that. Now, I'm a big fan of Tony. I actually did his Unleash the Power Within event back in 2012. I did the fire walk, and I do like him, actually. I like what he stands for. And he does, you're right, he pushes you out of your comfort zone. And I love that you've touched on that, the whole starving artist mindset and the torture soul. And, I have a background as a writer, and I get that. And it's almost like you almost feel a bit dirt, or in the beginning, you kind of feel like, oh, if you're being paid money to do something, it means you must be selling out. Right. And so it's like somehow being broke and, like you say, tortured is somehow that means you're a real artist. It's almost like a badge of honor. So yeah. I'm glad that you touched on that. And I know there's been, like the sort of myths that, in order for people to, like all the best artists, like they produce their work because they were these tortured souls.
Yes.
But, I think, do you think it's possible to create really good work. Because obviously, we're not all going to be happy clappy 24/7 every single day. Of course, we're going to go through challenges and grief and loss and all those kinds of things. But having those tools, like you said, those mindset tools to be able to process them and not get trapped and locked into those negative emotions for a really long period can be really quite useful. So I'm glad that you've touched on that to get people, because you and I both see people who are amazingly creative, but it's not the ones necessarily who are the most talented who are going to be the most successful, because unless they know how to market their work, they're not going to get known. And do you know what I mean? We can see people who are out there in the public eye who are, maybe a bit mediocre, but they've got amazing PR and marketing teams. And I think it's important to get that, particularly for ethical artists as well, such as yourself. An artist is also vegan. So I'm very glad that you've touched on that. So talking about that then, in terms of you being a vegan artist or an artist who is vegan, however you like to describe that, how do you weave your ethics into your art?
Yeah, well, for me, like I said, it was this transition. I kind of like to think of my work as kind of transitioning from darkness into light, and from going from that kind of depressive, almost negative mindset to positive and happy, and that really shows in my art. And actually, that's kind of where veganism even came on my radar. It just, it was like everything I was putting into my body was coming out in my artwork. And the more bad stuff I would put in, it was like the more negativity would come out. So putting positive and healthy ingredients definitely started to help me turn the corner. And when I finally made the full transition to becoming vegan, I just felt this huge burst of energy, and my artwork changed. But I think I try to make people think a little bit with my work as well. I have a couple series that deal with climate change and the rising oceans, and they're kind of pretty to look at, but there's like an underlying kind of more sinister element to them. Nice. Of what's going to happen if we don't really get this under control. Right. And also I have this new collection that I'm doing called my garbage collection, which is recycled trash, essentially my own recycled trash. I'm actually putting it into the paintings, and I actually recycle materials. I'll drive the streets of Los Angeles and I'll find wood that's been discarded, that's in good condition still, and I'll turn it into art. Stuff that's just going to go to the junkyard. I will actually turn it into a nice piece of art that somebody's going to hang in their place. So I kind of like to reduce my carbon footprint as much as I can with my art.
Fantastic. I love that. So I love that you are doing something practical. Like you say, you're weaving your ethics through the actual practical side of things, but also you've got that representation of those issues within your art as well. I think that's lovely. And I did watch your short video that was made about you, which is fabulous. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes page. I think that was, I really liked watching your process around that.
Thank you.
Now, in terms of, being an artist who's vegan, obviously there's the issue of supplies. So, brushes and paints and materials that are not necessarily vegan friendly. So tell us about your choices in that regard.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I hardly ever even use brushes anymore. I've started to move on to different kinds of tools. But when I do use brushes, I'll use Da Vinci brushes. Typically they're, animal friendly or synthetic brushes. I use oil paints, from like Winsor & Newton, they're not 100% their whole company, but most of their oil paints are animal friendly and vegan. I avoid one or two of their colors because I know they haven't for years. I mean, even centuries, they've been using certain colors have been using like charred animal bones, which I hate the idea of that, obviously. So I avoid those types of pigments altogether. And for me, it's about making choices as a consumer, just the same way I would do if I was going to the store. I shop at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods with my wife, and I don't boycott the store because they're selling animal products. I just buy their
vegan products.
Vegan products, exactly. And
nice.
I think that kind of makes people I think that hopefully will inspire them to sell more of those products. And I feel the same way with my supplies.
Fantastic. No, I love that. Brilliant. Now, as we know, the art world rather, is notoriously competitive. So how do you go about standing out and maintaining, clients and customers who are going to buy your works?
Oh, it's competitive? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Just a little, yeah, it's very competitive. Well, and I think nowadays even more so because, social media is kind of a blessing and a curse because you've got so many opportunities now to get your artwork out into a massive audience, even internationally. But with that, you've got everybody's an artist. You've got somebody who just, they've done 10 pieces or doodles and now they're on Instagram, trying to sell their work. So you're competing with even more people. So for me, I think it's about, you got to do the work. You got to do the work and you got to do it consistently and put as much quality into it as possible. Because I think that weeds out a lot of those people who are just posing as artists or, aren't quite as serious. You can see through that after a while. If you see somebody who's consistently putting out quality work, that's going to be on your radar. And for me also it sounds funny, but just treating people well. That was a big thing for me, developing good relationships in the art world, not just, using people to get your work out there, but really developing good relationships. And same thing with collectors. Like I really try to treat them. I actually worked in restaurants for many years, part-time, while I was trying to get my business off the ground. And, I fought it for many years, but it was when I made my peace with it and started really, being more conscious in my work and being more conscious with people that, it's funny that's when my art business started taking off. So I kind of transitioned into that using those same techniques that I use in the restaurant business. So I just treat people like I'd want to be treated, essentially.
I love that. I love how you're really kind of, you're such a good example of, taking these, what, are kind of taken as read in what we might consider traditional businesses and applying that to your art business. And I had a bit of a similar kind of wake up call myself where I was having to do like certain writing and editing gigs that I really didn't want to do just to, bring the money, like to pay the bills, because otherwise I would be a starving artist. Whereas, I wasn't being paid to write, the kinds of things that I really wanted to write. But then, I'd think, oh, well, how can I, I'd be clock watching and all of this. And then eventually I kind of realized that, okay, this is, like you say, it's part of the journey, and, be grateful for that, in that this is allowing me to, write the kinds of stuff that I want to write. And ultimately at some stage I'll be able to make a living from doing just that. And you're right. Once you make your peace with that, and like you say, treat people the way you'd want to be treated, and particularly like working with my partner who's very experienced in business and everything, and I realized that if I'm hiring staff, I wouldn't want them to be like me, sitting clock watching and couldn't wait to be getting out there and doing the least possible. So that was like a little bit of a wake up call. So I love that. And when you do that, then it's funny, things start to kind of fall in place. It's like the universe is rewarding you, for getting it. So no, I love that. That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. So now, in terms of there's a bit of marketing buzz at the moment going around that it's all about, don't think about competition, think more about collaboration. Think of your competitors as potential collaborators. I'm curious what your thoughts on that are, and whether you've done any kind of partnerships or ventures with other artists.
Yeah, well, I think I try to have kind of an abundance mindset where I think there's plenty of business and success out there for everybody. Instead of trying to looking at other artists as competitors and being people that I'm jealous of when they get something, I actually see that as great, good for them. This could happen for me too. And so I'm genuinely happy for other artists when they're successful. But actual collaborations, I as a matter of fact, I'm currently collaborating with an Australian artist, and we are we're both on this online marketplace that we met on, and we're basically starting two different paintings, and we're starting them. He's starting one in Australia, I'm starting one in Los Angeles, and then we're going to let them dry. That mine's almost ready to ship right now, and we're going to ship them out to each other and have the other person finish them, and then we're going to
nice.
So it's kind of it also stretches you to do things you haven't done before, but we can also market those on each of our end. We both have different places where we market ours, so we're basically doubling the amount of exposure we're going to get, and it's just nice to be able to work with another like-minded artist. And then I finished a collaboration with another Los Angeles artist too. She does felt, and she sews these kind of interesting objects, and we did this live. We took part in this gallery exhibition, and we did basically a live audience participation thing where people were pounding her felt objects into my painting. And that was something that I would have never done or never been exposed to had I not said yes to this. So yeah, it definitely, it forces you to grow. And I found that I get turned on to different opportunities that I wouldn't have been otherwise.
Fantastic. I love that. That's really kind of smart moves there. And it just goes to show how, instead of, like you say, like what you said about the abundance mindset, and it just goes to show that when you come from that perspective, it can really be a win for everybody, which is awesome. So that's lovely. So in terms of marketing and PR, Preston, so what have been some of the marketing strategies that you've used that have been successful, I guess, in growing your brand as an artist and getting you exposure?
Yeah, I think it was a mindset shift as well for me. It was this is not just my artwork. It's my brand is kind of me as an artist. So you're kind of in the art world. I found that people who are collecting your work, they actually like to feel as if they know you and they know a little bit about your story. They want to feel a connection to you. So a lot of my marketing started to shift to being a little more personable, sharing my story with people, and tying that in with my brand, as well as treating people with respect. But that way, you almost feel like your collector is a friend of yours, or almost like family. I've had people who've collected my work in the past, and they're just like, I don't know, I'm so excited for you whenever you sell a painting or something. So it's kind of nice, you feel like they're part of your tribe almost when you do that.
So how have you actually conveyed that? Have you done that on social media, or is it more of networking and in person?
Yeah, everything I do. Social media is big for me. I'm constantly on social media.
Which ones particularly, Preston?
I do Facebook, I do Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest. I'm on LinkedIn, a bunch of stuff. But I would say the ones that I actually get the most out of for my business are Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, Instagram as an artist, especially.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. If I were a photographer, I would do Snapchat. But yeah. So Instagram, and I've generated sales from them. I'll do paid promotions with them every once in a while to if I have a posting that I really want to get out there. You can kind of, you can basically select a group and narrow it down to a type of type of exposure you want to get. So that's been very well for me. But I think one of the biggest things is one of the older things is a newsletter, the good old fashioned newsletter
by email. Yeah.
Because these are people who've either signed up for your newsletter who are actually genuinely interested in you, and they're either a collector or maybe a soon to be collector of yours. So you're basically just kind of letting them know what's going on with you and things that you're accomplishing along the way. And I found that a lot of times those people will turn into collectors eventually, the people who are on your newsletter.
Got it. So when you're doing your activity, do you get like direct sales of your artwork from, say, either Facebook or Instagram, or is it more a case of getting them into your email list and then communicating with them over time so that they get to know, like, and trust you even more and when they eventually buy?
Right. I think it's both. I've had people who've been turned on to me and who signed up for my newsletter, but I've also made sales, not necessarily directly off of Instagram, but somebody found me on Instagram and they said they want to purchase something, and then I'll arrange a sale through a different,
cool.
Yeah. So either through my website or just directly through PayPal or something. Yeah. So it's nice, so having the website plus the social media plus these online marketplaces, and then, doing the brick and mortar stuff, I think it's all necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in regards to the use of the word vegan in your marketing materials and on your website, on your branding, and the prominence of the word, obviously there's the two schools of thought. Obviously when you pitched me to come on be on my show, you did a great pitch, and you made it very clear you're a vegan artist, and it was awesome. So, but what about in terms of the rest of your branding and marketing? Like, how much do you use the word vegan or not? And I ask this to everyone, and there's no right or wrong question. I'm just curious about what your thoughts
wrong.
are.
No, I'm just kidding. I definitely use it for certain like niche marketing stuff. Like, for example, with you, I did. But because you want to basically, I want to get my work to like-minded people. Like I think vegans are very interested in what other vegans are doing. And it's almost like your base. It can be your base or your tribe. So I like to market specifically using vegan for that. I don't do it all the time in general because my work isn't specifically like, I'm not painting vegan food, for example, or anything like that. But I think it's a little bit broader. It's all wrapped into being kind of a more conscious person. So I think that is reflected in my artwork more, is that, you know, the vegan is kind of baked into that essentially. The fact that I'm trying to put out conscious ideas in my artwork and colorful and happy ideas. So the vegan is kind of, like I said, it's more baked into it generally, but then I will also use it for niche marketing.
Got it. So, and you haven't found then that by being a vegan artist, it's kind of put some people off, for example, like galleries or dealers or collectors or whatever, if they know you're a vegan, they might have, I don't know, preconceptions.
Well, people do. It's funny. I mean, I'm lucky that I live in Los Angeles. I think it's a little more accepted here than some places in the country, in the world. But yeah, you still get, you know, the raised eyebrows sometimes, and people just, you know, they have their own baggage that comes along with it. And really, they almost feel like you're judging them or something.
Yeah.
which is completely the opposite of what we do, I think. But what I like to do with that is, I think, I just try to kind of lead by example. So if I'm doing well and I'm, you know, taking care of my body and, you know, you have a lot of energy, I think people kind of come around in that way. They see that you're doing well, and then they get interested, and then they start asking you questions about your diet or your lifestyle. And that's a kind of good way to kind of sneak in there.
It is. I love that. I've tried to take that approach particularly in the last part of the years. I've been vegan 21 years this year.
Oh, wow.
And certainly in the past, I probably didn't. I was, you know, the angry vegan for a while. But then I do find it's like, you know, if you're kind of, you know, seen as being fabulous and fun and, you know, enjoying life. And it's like, and people say, oh, you know, how come what happened? You say, oh, yeah, it's because I'm vegan. And then they're like, oh, okay. So it's, associating it with something positive is a good advocacy. For sure. Definitely. Now, you got a commission to paint President Barack Obama in 2009, I think it was, which was pretty exciting. Tell us about initially, how did the gig come about, and also what was your experience of it, actually, you know, fulfilling it?
Yeah, well, it was great. It's still one of my favorite things that I've ever done. But I didn't actually have the president sit for me, but I was, which would have been amazing. I think he's too busy for that. But
maybe not nowadays, though.
Maybe not now. Hey.
Say, hey, you know, you've done your main job. Hey,
Mr. President, if you're listening, I'm available anytime. No, but yeah. So I was working at a restaurant with a friend at the time, and you know, I was crazy doing my artwork on the side, and he had a friend who was actually organizing one of the balls for the inauguration in 2009. There's hundreds of balls that go on that night, but this was one of the important ones that, you know, that the president was going to make an appearance at. And he was working with an artist that fell through, and he was scrambling at the last minute. He needed somebody, and my friend just kind of mentioned my name, that my friend and roommate is a great artist, and you should check out his work. And he checked out my work, and he loved it, and he got in contact with me. And I was like, I was terrified because he needed basically 12 or 13 paintings in 3 weeks. And I was working full time. So I was working part time in a restaurant, but I said yes, of course, because you know you can't say no to that. Sure. So my life just became, waking up, painting, going to work, coming back, painting, and not sleeping at all. And I work with oil, so they don't dry very fast. So I had to do all this in 3 weeks. I had fans set up all over my apartment, drying the paintings, and tripping over them. And he needed them basically to be almost like a replica of the original, but with subtle differences. So that was another added little stressor, but I got it done at the last minute under the wire. I think even maybe one of them was a tiny bit not dry when we sent it off, but I actually got to go to Washington, DC and go to the ball. And my paintings were distributed to celebrities at the inauguration, or at the ball, like Ed Harris, Ashley Judd, Patricia Arquette, some really big people that I
Wow.
admire, and I got to meet all them. And it
Oh,
was a
how
wonderful experience.
amazing.
Yeah,
How
it was great.
wonderful.
Yeah, it
So
was really
just
great.
going back a bit to when you were creating, so were you not, like when you got, I mean, that's a wonderful example of, there you were working in a restaurant to pay the bills, doing your art on the side, and this opportunity came out. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So I think that's a good message to send to people, if you are like doing, a day job and you're doing your, your creative stuff on the side, opportunities can still happen by being out there, which is great. So, but when you got that, and like you say, you had to do all this work in such a short space of time. I mean, were you nervous at all? Because sometimes, when big opportunities fall in the lap of creative people, sometimes they can kind of almost get like a paralysis and, get the whole negative thing, go, am I good enough? Oh my God, can I do this? So was there any of that with you, or had you listened to the Tony Robbins CD so many times that it was like, no, or did you not have even time to get nervous and just...
That was kind of it, actually. I didn't have the time. I just jumped, and I knew that I literally didn't have a moment's free time. So I just jumped into it without thinking about it. But,
Nice.
But yeah, of course I was nervous the whole time. I felt I had, the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like, not that it was that important, in the grand scheme of things, but for me it was, and I was afraid that if I didn't deliver, this could be it for me. So, so there was a lot of pressure, but I didn't have time to really think about the pressure at the time.
Yeah, I think that's good. I've found that it's helped me in the past, as my background is journalism, is having a deadline. It's like, you haven't got time to progress. And sometimes, like, I'll do all my research well in advance because I don't want to leave that, but I'll often leave the actual writing of it till close to the deadline, because then I know that I'm not going to have time to kind of sit and procrastinate or get writer's block or do any of that nonsense. It's like, okay, it's due in like 2 days. I've got to just get on with it and work. So
you have no choice.
There's something about that for sure. Now, how did that, I mean, that's a great coup for you, obviously, as an artist. So how did that commission, how do you think that's impacted your art business?
Well, it's funny because it's all positive. Some of it might sound negative, but it's all been extremely positive for me because, first of all, it was kind of one of those things that I felt like it was almost like a feather in my cap at the time. Like, okay, look, somebody else values my work, and they're going to these celebrities, and I'm going to Washington DC. So it kind of validated me a little bit as an artist, which was very important. But at the same time, I was a little bit green at the time as far as being a business minded, and I was just too busy. I didn't have much time to really think about getting this out there, marketing it, writing the press releases, getting this out to the world, having, massive coverage. I kind of thought that was already going to take care of itself a little bit, which it did to an extent. I mean, I got an article from my hometown written, which is wonderful. But looking back on it, if I, me now, I would have just been all over. And if I didn't have time, I would have hired somebody to do it. So it was a great learning experience for me as as being almost like an entrepreneur now. You have to take advantage of these things when they come up. So, and I've been able to use it since then. And it's still one of those things that I really like to talk to people about because I think it's a great story. But yeah, I definitely use it as a learning experience. Like, next time this kind of thing comes about, I have to pull out all the stops, essentially,
Yeah. No, that's great advice, actually. And it is, I often teach people that, because I teach people how to do their own PR, and it is very much, maximize and leverage, particularly things like that. But it's actually, I mean, I've found that it's worked for you in that when I was, looking up about you and checking you out, would he be a good guest for the show? And I must admit, when I saw that, I was very impressed. And I think, so that obviously can be a great thing to have on your resume. I mean, it helps to sort of, stand you apart from other artists. Like, oh wow, did this commission, and the celebrity angle, like it or not, we live in a celebrity obsessed culture, and so if that can happen, then name dropping and what have you, it's a useful thing. So that's fantastic. Congratulations.
And I'm very grateful for it. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, in terms of, so for other people listening to this, and maybe you're at the stage you were at a few years ago, they're doing their day job and then they're doing their art on the side. What advice would you give to them for those that are, aspiring one day to make a living from their art? What, in your opinion, are the key things they need to take into account?
Well, I think the main thing, and this is the thing that people kind of don't ever want to hear, is you got to do the work. You have to really I think nowadays, like we talked about earlier a bit with social media, how almost anybody can be an artist nowadays online. But so there's kind of this whole, I don't know, movement to just be like, oh, I can push a button and I can be this. Well, you really can't. I mean, you're not going. You might get a little, 15 minutes of fame here and there, but you're not going to have a lasting business off of that. So you really have to do the work. I think there is still something to be said for the whole, 10,000 hours or 10 years to mastery type thing. You got to put in that time and develop your craft. First of all, you got to build a body of work. Because without that, you have nothing to show people, and plus, you're not going to have a voice. You're not going to be doing anything unique as an artist if you haven't developed that. And then after that, you have to. I mean, I think you should be developing in your spare time. Your business. Like for me, it was one of those things where I spent many years just creating my craft, and then it was about developing certain habits that, like. For example, I would get up in the morning. I would go to work at 4 p.m. in a restaurant, and I would use my whole day getting up, taking pictures of my new work, putting it online, developing business strategies, marketing it, and then I would, put on my restaurant attire and go to work. And so developing that, and then I slowly kind of paid off debt, came up with a little bit of a surplus, saved up enough money, and then I'd established after a certain point that I was selling at a certain level where I was like, okay, I could see myself maintaining this level. And then I basically, at some point I decided, well, this is my point to jump. And, as Tony Robbins says, burn the boats because you have to do it at some point.
Fantastic. I love that you've shared that. That's brilliant. Really good advice. I love this. This is great. What about art school then? Is it still necessary and or worth it?
I think it's case specific, these days. I think, I studied in school, and I think it's funny that a lot of people in our world will throw around this like dirty word or dirty phrase of oh, are you self-taught? and just if you're listening and if you're self-taught, there's no problem with being self-taught. I think everybody to an extent is self-taught. I taught myself how to draw a drawing my whole life, and then I kind of honed that a little bit in school. But I think if you want to do something in our world, if you want to teach, for example, you have to go to our school. If you want to be a professional artist, it's not mandatory. I learned a lot of tools from it. My professor was this old Boston teacher, been painting for 40 years. He was my mentor, and I learned so much about being an artist. So it was very valuable for me. But there's so many things online nowadays, like, you go to Creative Live, or you can take creative courses online for a fraction of the cost, or, even finding tutorials and stuff like that. So if you have the drive already and you maybe think you want to skip school, I think people can do it. But at the same time, if you were pressing me, I would say try to go to school. Try to get the foundation. Try to learn the tools before you jump into the marketplace. No,
that's good advice. Good advice. And you're right, it's on that case-to-case basis. A friend of mine, Rach Moran's a self-taught artist here, and she makes her living from doing it. She was also a talented musician. But like she's done what you said, it's that constant body of work. And I think she's got some key clients who particularly love what she does. But, when you say self-taught, but I think she would also studied, like, whether it's reading or just, going online and learning stuff is a good thing. But no, it's good to know, that whole, because sometimes it can be a bit sort of snooty, and sometimes it's like, oh, well, if you haven't gone to art school, darling, you're not a proper artist, exactly. Kind of thing. So it's just kind of interesting, but also it can be very expensive, going to school, particularly in the US definitely. And other countries where you've then got to pay all of that back.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's great. So in terms of art shows, so we've seen, a massive change in how people buy their things that they like, whether it's luxury goods or whether it's their day-to-day stuff. And we're seeing, more and more people are going online, for example, to get their entertainment. We're not even going to the video store anymore. We're just like downloading from, or watching on streaming. So what about actual art shows? How important are they nowadays?
I think they're less important, but they're still important. I mean, if I'm being honest, the online marketplaces that I belong to and selling off my website and selling off social media, those were the reason why I was eventually able to quit my job. I do, I do sell in shows too, but ideally you want to have a balance, right? You want to be doing everything, but I don't think they're quite as essential as they used to be. And having, having all these online marketplaces and the ability to sell online through your own website now, it's been kind of a game changer for a lot of people, because before it seemed like the art world was very exclusive. It still is exclusive, but people would tell you, basically a gallery owner could make or break your career. If you can't get into a gallery, then, you're kind of screwed. But nowadays you can at least go home and do the work and try to work at selling it. But I have shows. I'm doing a couple like group shows this month, and I've got a show coming up the next month. So I do have a balance, but I think I spend most of my time, a majority of my time, getting my work online and trying to market it that way. And then I use shows kind of to supplement, which is probably the exact opposite of how it used to be.
Cool. That's interesting, the changes. In terms of that then, so if an artist, like, so say a major gallery or a gallery doesn't pick you up at the moment, so they're not going to cover the costs of marketing or, the venue or anything like that. So say you want to put on an artist wants to put on their own show. What are some of the costs involved in kind of doing it themselves?
Oh yeah, well that can be pricey. I mean, the upside of putting on your own show obviously is that if you sell well, you get all the profits, which is great. But there's the rent. You got to find a space. You got to find a space to rent, and in Los Angeles and many places, many cities around the world, it's really expensive. So I would recommend going into it with a few people, some people that you admire and you like their work, and splitting that. But then you got to handle the marketing of it, and ideally you want to maybe have some sponsorship for the event. So you can find some ways around this. A lot of companies will, like, let's say you want to get like a bottled water company to come. Sometimes they'll provide the bottled water in exchange for people coming to the show and seeing their product there, or for for a cheaper price, I guess. So those are a couple things. But and also transporting your work there. It's pretty costly, but if you do it right and you get people to the show and you create some sort of buzz online or in local newspaper and you sell, then it's worthwhile.
Yeah, no, those are some really good ideas. I love particularly what you said about the sponsorship. I was talking to someone recently, a vegan business owner, who was putting on an event in a fringe festival where they had to basically pay for everything. And they said it was definitely a learning experience for them. And one of the things I advised them was around, trying to get that sponsorship in, because that can really help to offset your costs. So no, those are some great ideas. Now, I know obviously you say you've done the Tony Robbins thing. You've done a lot of work around your mindset. Rejection is common. It's common in many businesses, probably almost all businesses, but probably more so in the arts world. So how do you cope with that, and what specific strategies do you do? Like, if someone says, that artwork's a load of rubbish, or what I mean, like, how do you cope with that, particularly with online? You mentioned, people are not afraid, particularly if they're hiding behind anonymity, to say their opinions. So how do you cope with that sort of criticism or rejection?
You're talking about haters. I can't remember who it was that said this, but if you have some haters, you're doing something right. Basically, you got to get some haters. Because then you're on the right track. People are going to take the time to write something about you. It's because you struck a nerve with them in some way. So that's a good thing. But rejection is probably one of the hardest things as an artist. I mean, in general, right, as a business owner, but I think especially in the art world, I mean, you get rejected constantly. And for me, it was about another mindset shift. It was about seeing rejection as something positive. If I'm getting rejected, it means I'm moving forward. It means that, I'm putting myself out there. So if you're not getting any rejections, you're probably not putting yourself out there and nobody's seeing your work. So that's a positive thing.
I like that. That's a good point. It's like, not being rejected is a sign you're being too safe. Being out there. Nice.
And if you're too safe, then you don't grow. So that was one of my big things last year. I kind of have a little theme each year. My theme last year was the year of no fear. So basically I would just put myself out there and do as many things as possible. I'd say yes to things and do this and that. And because I think people, they think that everything that they're doing is so important and that oh my God, if somebody rejects you for this, your career's over. Really, people are busy. They don't have time to be thinking about one little rejection you had, or if you tried something and it failed, just move on and try something else. But the funny thing is, when I did that, I actually didn't get a lot of rejections. I didn't get a lot of negativity. It opened a lot of doors for me. So just trying to be resilient, stay positive, keep trying new things to get yourself to grow. But also for me, I know this is a vegan podcast, so I mean, getting the diet is huge for me. Or I mean, it's not really a diet; it's more of a lifestyle for me. But eating well, keeping my energy levels up. If I were like I was in the past, when I was the quote unquote starving artist and I was drinking at night, I would wake up with a hangover and I'd be working and I wouldn't be able to handle it. Rejection's so it's amplified. So when you're getting up early, you're putting good things in your body. I meditate. I try to do some yoga or run. I even have like an inversion table where I'll hang upside down, get the blood flowing to the brain, do some breathing exercises. When you're doing those kind of things, it kind of like helps to mitigate a little bit, some of the rejection.
No, that's really good points, actually. Like you say, if you're already in a kind of negative state that has been brought on by, whatever lack of sleep, which is my thing. Sometimes when I'm on deadline, sleep's the first thing to go, and which is fine if it's maybe one night, but then if it builds up, you're in that physical state, and you're right, it does really amplify anything negative. So I love what you've shared there. And I think I heard someone, I don't know who said it, but every single rejection or every single no is another step towards the yeses, which I thought was a nice little analogy too. So cool. So just final questions, Preston. So what have been the key lessons you say you've learned through running your art-based business? Because you've, like you say, you've gone from having it as a side hustle and doing what you needed to do to pay the bills to shifting to being a full-time artist, which is awesome. So what looking back, to date, what would you say have been the key lessons you've learned?
Key lessons is going back to the first thing we talked about is no one's going to do it for you. So take it seriously. I mean, the sky's the limit when you run your own business, or you're an artist or an actor or whatever it is. Sky's the limit. So you can work as hard as you want and as creatively as you want. It's not always about working 100% hard. It's about working, some more, working smart, essentially. So, the sky's the limit to what you can achieve based on how much energy you're putting into it. And then for me, I learned a lot about, I used to complain a lot. I used to have a lot of negativity and, jealousy of other people who were doing well and I wasn't doing well. Complaining, the world's not taking notice of my artwork. And it's funny because looking back on it, I'm like, well, the world wasn't taking notice of your artwork because you weren't doing anything, and it wasn't to the point that it needed to be. I mean, I look back and I feel like everything happened the way it happened for a reason for me. So it's just kind of trusting that and knowing that it's leading you somewhere. Don't be so caught up on, every little bad thing that happens to you, because, if you're moving forward and if you have, if you've got positive goals, you're going to find out down the road that you look back and you're like, I'm glad that thing didn't happen because I wasn't ready for it then. And now I'm ready for it.
Yeah. Like sometimes it can be, I know when I was working in journalism and one of the jobs I had, I loved. I mean, there was some, frustrating aspects to it, but then, and eventually it came that I left. And when I looked back at the time, I was devastated. I thought, oh my gosh, this is awful. But now when I look back, I'm like, oh my God, thank God I got out of there when I did. So
right?
it's funny. We don't always see it at the time when it's happening, but it can certainly be happening for a good reason. Fantastic. Yes. So what about your long-term vision for yourself and your artwork and your brand, I guess, Preston? What do you see in the future?
Take over the world. No. I'm grateful for any success that I've had. I think success, especially in the art world, is very subjective. But my long-term vision is to have enough wealth. I don't mean wealth just monetarily, but just general wealth in my life that I'm not consumed by the day-to-day struggles, but and I'm not so consumed with myself, essentially, but that I'm able to kind of give back. I want to eventually help other artists. I want other artists to kind of avoid certain pitfalls that I, had and went through. That whole, being negative, being the starving, tortured artist. But I would love to be able to kind of shake them at that level and be like, look, you can be a positive, happy artist and create good work. and that's where I see myself eventually is being comfortable enough and being, successful enough that I'm focused on giving back to people. So.
Wonderful. I love that. Well, you've shared some amazing insights. I've certainly been very inspired by our interview, and I think you're one kind of PMS that we can embrace and love.
All right, I'm going to use that.
There's a little quote for you.
Thank you, Katrina.
No, but it's been wonderful. It's been really great to have someone such as yourself who's an artist, who's vegan, who's ethical, and like you say, who is able to earn a living as an artist and do, like you say, meaningful work without having to be consistently complaining and negative and, like you say, tortured, starving artists. So I really love that. I think this has been a very inspiring interview, and I know that a lot of vegan creatives who will be listening to this will definitely get a lot from it. So thank you so much for chatting and being on the show with me today, Preston. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
So that was Preston M Smith from PMS Artwork. You can find out more at pmsartwork.com. And that link is on the show notes page at veganbusinessmedia.com/podcasts and going to episode 84. Now for our vegan business news roundup. Australia's largest supplier of dairy products has announced a 22% drop in milk sales in the past financial year, reports the Daily Mail. Murray Goulburn revealed that milk intake had dropped to 2.7 billion litres and is expected to drop even lower. And this is despite a campaign by the industry to get customers to boycott cheap, non-branded dairy milk in supermarkets. The company's financial report says the group posted a $370.8 million loss during the financial year 2016-17. Meanwhile, the plant-based dairy-free sector continues to grow. So let's hope that more animal-based dairies follow Elmhurst in New York, which switched to making nut milks after 92 years in the dairy industry due to inconsistent losses. Students at the University of California, Berkeley are taking on the meat industry with the creation of an alternative meats lab focused on developing plant-based alternatives. The Alt Meat Lab, part of the university's Sutaja Centre for Entrepreneurship and Technology, will use the latest tools and technology to create plant-based proteins aimed at meat eaters. Co-chair for the new lab, visiting Professor Ricardo San Martin, said, "There is evidence that meat lovers would buy plant-based meat alternatives if the taste is right. One of our goals for the lab will be to develop delicious food that is similar to meat from a nutritional and functional perspective, but may not necessarily mimic meat exactly." The initiative follows the university's launch of the world's first course solely focused on developing plant meat products earlier this year. That's 2017 if you're listening in the future, in partnership with the Good Food Institute, a non-profit whose mission is to support the success of the meat alternatives industry. This is so refreshing. This is exactly the kind of innovation that universities need to be doing instead of courses and students being influenced by large, unethical multinational corporations. Fantastic news. Finally, a vegan cupcake decorating studio has opened in Miami, Florida, reports Veg News. Vegan bakery Bunny Cakes is behind the quirky initiative, which offers participants the opportunity to choose between various packages that include everything you need for decorating sweet treats. One package includes 6 large fresh-baked and unfrosted cupcakes, while another has a 5-inch 3-layer cake in a choice of vanilla, chocolate or funfetti flavours. Participants can choose to decorate their delights with 3 buttercream colours, 3 fondant balls, and 2 items from the goodie bar, such as rainbow sprinkles. So this is a clever move by Bunny Cakes to diversify their offerings and bring in an additional stream of income alongside sales of their cakes in the original store, which is located in front of the new studio in the Edgewater neighbourhood. It just goes to show you don't have to be locked into doing one thing in your business. So maybe have a think about how creative you can get and what other offerings you could provide for your customers or clients. So that's it for this episode of Vegan Business Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a review and rating on iTunes or any other platform you're listening on. Finally, I encourage you to head over to veganbusinessmedia.com, where you can find more resources, including details of my media and PR consultations, copywriting, editing and proofreading services to help you grow your vegan business. I'm Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business, and I look forward to catching up with you in the next episode of Vegan Business Talk. Bye for now.